The papers were served to me on the morning I buried my husband. That is not a metaphor, not an exaggeration for drama. It was the literal truth. And that is how I knew, within the first 10 seconds, that something in my life had shifted permanently. I was standing in the foyer of our colonial house in Brookline, Massachusetts, still wearing black stockings that itched behind my knees, when the doorbell rang. Outside, the October air smelled like wet leaves and stone. The hearse had already pulled away. The flowers were wilting in symmetrical rows on the lawn. Neighbors lingered across the street, pretending not to stare. I assumed it was another casserole. Instead, it was a young woman with a rigid smile and a leather portfolio pressed flat against her chest like a shield. "Eleanor Whitmore?" she asked. "Yes," I said, my voice dry, unfamiliar in my own ears. She handed me an envelope. Cream paper. Heavy. Expensive. My name printed in neat black type. No return address. "You've been served," she said, and turned away before I could speak. I stood there longer than necessary, staring at the door as if it might explain itself. Somewhere upstairs, a clock ticked. My daughter's laughter drifted faintly from the kitchen, where she was pouring coffee for mourners. I did not open the envelope right away. That was the first mistake my family thought I would make. Hesitation. Shock. Weakness. They forgot who I was. My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I am 63 years old, and for 38 years, I was the chief financial officer of a publicly traded pharmaceutical company headquartered in Cambridge. I negotiated acquisitions worth more than most people's retirement dreams. I sat across from senators and shareholders and men who underestimated me until it cost them millions. But that morning, I was not the woman from boardrooms and earnings calls. I was a widow, still smelling faintly of church incense and lilies, still hearing the hollow thud of dirt hitting wood. I carried the envelope into the study and closed the door. Inside was a petition, filed in Norfolk Probate Court. Emergency conservatorship, files by my own children, both of them. My son, Andrew Whitmore, age 40. My daughter, Claire Whitmore, age 37. The document alleged that I was mentally compromised, that I had demonstrated erratic financial behavior, that I was emotionally unstable following my husband's death, and therefore incapable of managing my estate, valued at approximately 9 figures. They requested immediate control. Immediate. The hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. 5 days. I sat down slowly in my husband's chair, the leather still creased to the shape of his body. My hands did not shake. My pulse was steady. What I felt was not grief, it was clarity. There is a moment in every betrayal when your body recognizes the truth before your heart is ready to accept it. This was that moment. I read the petition twice, then the third time. Attached were exhibits, emails taken out of context, a charitable donation I had made to a women's legal fund framed as impulsive generosity, a property transfer into a revocable trust described as confusion over asset ownership, a statement from a physician I had never met suggesting possible cognitive decline. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. I remembered Thanksgiving dinner 3 weeks earlier. Andrew carving the turkey too aggressively. Claire watching me with narrowed eyes as I poured wine. The way they had exchanged a look when I corrected Andrew on a basic accounting term. I had thought it was grief. Stress. I was wrong. They were counting. That afternoon, after the house finally emptied and the last of the flowers were hauled away, I poured myself a single glass of scotch and went upstairs to my bedroom. I locked the door. Then I opened my laptop. I did not call my children. I did not cry. I made a list. Every account, every asset, every document, every favor owed, every enemy made, every loyalty still intact. They thought grief had softened me. They thought burying my husband had buried my spine. They had forgotten something important. I did not survive 4 decades in corporate America by being sentimental. And if Andrew and Claire wanted to take me to court and declare me incompetent, I would let them try. But I would not lose. Not this. Not everything. And certainly not to the children, who learned manipulation at my dining table and decided I was no longer useful, except as an inheritance waiting to be unlocked. By the time the sun set over Brookline, I had already made the first call. The trap was being set. Andrew arrived unannounced the next morning, wearing the expression he used when he wanted something but did not want to admit it. Concern, lightly seasoned with patience. He hugged me too tightly, his hand pressing into the small of my back, as if checking whether I was still solid, still real. "Mom," he said softly, "how are you holding up?" I stepped back, looked at him, not as my son, but as a man who had signed legal papers against me less than 24 hours after his father was lowered into the ground. "I'm fine," I said. "Coffee?" He hesitated. That pause told me everything. "Yes," he said, "that would be great." We sat at the kitchen island, where I had taught him fractions using blueberries when he was 6. He watched my hands as I poured, as if expecting them to shake. They didn't. "Claire's worried about you," he said carefully. "We both are." I raised an eyebrow. Enough to call a process server? His jaw tightened for a fraction of a second before he recovered. He smiled. Too quickly. "Mom, we just want to help. You've been through a lot. Dad's death, the stress, the decisions. It's a lot for anyone your age." My age. There it was. I sipped my coffee and let the silence stretch. People reveal more when you let them fill the quiet. "You know," he continued, "if you just let us manage things for a while, it wouldn't have to be adversarial. We can withdraw the petition if you agree to a temporary arrangement." "And what would that arrangement be?" I asked. He slid a folder across the counter. "Power of attorney. Durable. Comprehensive. Everything." I did not touch it. Instead, I looked past him, out the window, at the maple tree my husband had planted the year Andrew was born. Its leaves were turning red, almost violent in their beauty. "Did Claire help you draft this?" I asked. "She was involved," he admitted. "She thinks you're not seeing things clearly." "I see very clearly," I said. He sighed, as if I were a stubborn child. "Mom, the board forced you out. Dad handled most of the social stuff. You've always been intense. We're just trying to protect the family." The family. What he meant was the estate. What he did not know was that I had already seen the internal emails between him and Claire. The private messages discussing timelines, valuations, liquidity. They had been planning this for months. They just hadn't expected my husband to die so conveniently. Andrew reached for my hand. I pulled it back. "I will see you in court," I said calmly. His face changed then. The mask slipped. Fear, sharp and sudden. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said. "No," I replied. "You did that when you decided I was easier to steal from than to respect." He stood abruptly, chair scraping against tile. "You don't know what you're doing," he said. I smiled. "Oh," I said, "I know exactly what I'm doing." After he left, I sat alone at the island for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had not used in years. "Margaret," I said when she answered, "I need you." She did not ask questions. She never did. And that was when I knew my children had already lost. They just hadn't realized it yet. Margaret Langley arrived that afternoon with the same quiet authority she had carried for 40 years. She was 71 now, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, wearing a camel coat that probably cost more than Andrew's monthly mortgage. She had been my first mentor when I joined the company in my 20s, the woman who taught me that power was most effective when exercised calmly and without witnesses. She did not hug me. She never did. She set her briefcase on my dining table and looked around the room, taking in the wilted flowers, the condolence cards, the untouched platters of food. "They moved quickly," she said. "Yes," I replied. "They were prepared." Margaret nodded. "That tells me everything." We sat across from each other. She opened her laptop and slid it toward me. "I pulled the court filing this morning. Your children's attorney is a man named Stephen Halloway, mid-level firm, trusts and estates, sloppy reputation." "That tracks," I said. She tapped the screen. "But what interested me more was not the petition, it was the timing. Your husband's death certificate was issued at 9 in the morning. The conservatorship filing was time-stamped at 11:14. Andrew and Claire had not even waited for the obituary to go online," Margaret continued. "That tells a judge this was premeditated. Judges do not like that." I leaned back and closed my eyes for a moment. When I opened them, the grief came, sharp and sudden. Not for my husband, for the illusion of my children. I don't want to just win, I said quietly. I want to end this. Margaret smiled. Then we do not play defense. For the next 3 hours, we mapped everything. My assets, my trusts, the clauses my children clearly had not read closely enough. The discretionary powers built into structures they assumed were rigid. They're counting on freezing you, Margaret said. If they can get temporary control, even for a few weeks, they can move money, create leverage, force a settlement. I nodded, which is why they won't get that far. That evening, I made my second mistake. I agreed to dinner with Claire. She arrived wearing black, pearls at her throat, mascara smudged just enough to suggest tears. She hugged me tightly and whispered, "I'm so worried about you, Mom." We ate quietly. Halfway through the meal, she set down her fork. "You didn't even tell us you'd changed the trust last year," she said softly. I looked at her. "You didn't ask." She smiled sadly. "You've always been so private. Dad used to say you planned everything 3 moves ahead." He was right. Her smile faltered. "Andrew thinks you're angry," she said, "that you're trying to punish us." "Andrew thinks a lot of things," I replied. She reached across the table. "We're your children. We love you." I watched her hand hover between us, the faint tremor, the calculation. "You love what I represent," I said. "Security, continuity, comfort." Her eyes hardened. "You're not being fair," she said. "No," I replied. "I'm being accurate." She stood abruptly. "If you go through with this, you'll lose us." I met her gaze. "You decided that before you filed." She left without saying goodbye. That night, I did not sleep. Instead, I read every email Andrew and Claire had ever sent me. Every subtle pressure, every question framed as concern, every suggestion that my age was becoming a liability. The pattern was undeniable. They had stopped seeing me as a mother years ago. I was a portfolio. By morning, my resolve had crystallized into something cold and unbreakable. Margaret called at 8. "We have a complication," she said. I felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. Anticipation. "What kind?" I asked. "Your husband's will," she said. "There's a codicil." My heart skipped. "I've never seen it," I said. "Neither have your children," Margaret replied. "Which means if they know about it now, someone showed them." I stared out the window at the maple tree. "Find out who," I said. She paused. "I already did." The codicil was signed 6 months before my husband died. I remembered the week clearly. He had been tired, short of breath. We thought it was stress. He had insisted on seeing his own attorney, a man named Peter Lawson, without me. Margaret laid the document on my desk. "It does not change your ownership," she said carefully. "But it does change the narrative." I read it slowly. In the event of my incapacitation, my husband expressed his wish that Andrew and Claire be consulted regarding family assets. Consulted, not empowered. But phrasing mattered. And this phrasing gave them just enough smoke to suggest fire. "Who showed them this?" I asked. "Lawson," Margaret replied. "He met with Andrew 3 weeks ago." My hands curled into fists. Betrayal, it turns out, is rarely singular. It spreads. We moved fast. By Tuesday afternoon, Margaret had filed a motion to dismiss the emergency petition based on lack of credible medical evidence. By Wednesday, we had subpoenas out for Lawson's communications and Halloway's billing records. That night, Andrew called. "Mom," he said, his voice urgent. "We need to talk." "About what?" I asked. "There are things you don't know." "I know you filed legal action against me," I replied. "That seems sufficient." "You're being manipulated," he said. "Margaret has her own agenda." I laughed, a short, sharp sound that surprised both of us. "Andrew," I said, "you grew up watching me negotiate hostile takeovers. Do not insult me by pretending I cannot see who is standing in front of me." He lowered his voice. "Claire is panicking. She thinks you're going to cut us out." I smiled. "Tell her not to panic," I said. "Tell her to tell the truth." Silence. Then, quietly, "You're really going to do this?" "Yes," I replied. He hung up. The hearing was 2 days away. On Thursday morning, I met with my physician of 20 years. She ran a full cognitive assessment. Thorough, documented, impeccable. The results were exactly what I expected. Superior function for my age group. That afternoon, Margaret handed me a draft amendment. Irrevocable. Charitable Remainder Trust. Effective immediately upon filing. My children would receive income only under specific behavioral conditions. Transparency. Cooperation. No further legal action. Violation meant exclusion. Completely. I signed without hesitation. That evening, Claire sent me a message. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I stared at the words for a long time. Then I typed a single sentence. Neither did I. The night before the hearing, I slept peacefully for the first time since my husband died. Because whatever happened next, I would no longer be pretending. And neither would they. The courthouse smelled like disinfectant and old paper, a combination I had always associated with consequences. Margaret and I arrived early. She wore navy, I wore gray. Neutral colors. Authority without aggression. The kind of visual language judges understand instinctively. Andrew and Claire arrived separately. That detail mattered. Andrew sat rigidly at the petitioner's table, jaw clenched, eyes forward. Claire lingered near the back of the room, phone in hand, pretending to read messages while scanning the room for reactions. She avoided my gaze entirely. Their attorney, Stephen Halloway, shuffled papers with the nervous energy of a man who knew the ground beneath him was not as solid as he had hoped. He did not look at me. He did not look at Margaret. He kept glancing toward the door, as if expecting someone else to arrive and save him. No one did. When the judge entered, the room stood. Judge Miriam Kessler was in her early 60s, hair cut short, glasses perched low on her nose. I had never appeared before her, but I knew her reputation. Methodical, unsentimental, intolerant of theatrics. She took her seat and looked directly at Andrew. "This is an emergency conservatorship petition," she said. "Those are not filed lightly. I expect clear evidence. We will proceed carefully." Halloway stood and began his presentation. He spoke about grief, about age, about concern. He referenced my long career as if it were proof of rigidity rather than competence. He mentioned my husband's death repeatedly, as though repetition could substitute for substance. Then he introduced the physician's letter. Margaret stood. "Objection," she said calmly. "Lack of foundation and credibility." Judge Kessler raised an eyebrow. "Explain." Margaret handed up a folder. "The physician referenced in that letter has not treated Mrs. Whitmore, has no established relationship with her, and has previously been disciplined by the State Medical Board. Furthermore, we have a full cognitive evaluation performed this week by Mrs. Whitmore's long-standing primary care physician and a consulting neurologist." The judge read silently. Andrew shifted in his chair. When it was my turn to speak, I did not stand immediately. I let the silence work. Then I rose. "Your Honor," I said, "this petition was filed less than 3 hours after my husband's death certificate was issued. My children did not call me. They did not ask how I was. They did not suggest help. They asked for control." Andrew stood. We were trying to protect her. I turned to him slowly. "From what?" I asked. He hesitated. "From making mistakes," he said. I smiled slightly. "I built a multinational company's financial strategy for nearly 4 decades. If I am capable of that, I am capable of managing my own life." Judge Kessler nodded once. Margaret then introduced the email. Private correspondence between Andrew and Claire. Discussions of asset timing. Liquidity windows. References to freezing her before she moves things again. The room changed. Claire stood suddenly. Those were taken out of context. Judge Kessler looked at her. "Sit down." Claire sat. By the time Margaret finished, Halloway's shoulders had sagged. He whispered something to Andrew, who shook his head. The judge leaned back. "This court does not exist to facilitate family power struggles disguised as concern," she said. "Petition denied. With prejudice." I exhaled for the first time in hours. But Judge Kessler was not finished. "I am also referring this matter to the court's Elder Advocacy Review Panel," she continued. "False or exaggerated claims of incapacity are a serious abuse of the system." Andrew's face drained of color. Court adjourned. In the hallway, Claire tried to speak to me. "Mom," she said, tears finally spilling. "Please, this got out of hand." I looked at her. "You let it," I said. Every step of the way, Andrew did not approach. He walked past me as if I were already gone. That night, I received a call from Margaret. "They're not done," she said. "I know. I replied, and neither am I. Retaliation does not always come loudly. Sometimes it comes in whispers. 2 days after the hearing, my assistant of 12 years called to tell me someone had contacted her, asking about my mental state during my final years at the company. A week later, a former colleague forwarded me an email requesting background context on my leadership style. Andrew and Claire were planting seeds. If they could not control my assets, they would poison my reputation. Margaret anticipated this. She always did. We convened in my study with another woman I trusted implicitly. Denise Caldwell, former investigative journalist turned crisis consultant, 68, sharp as broken glass. "They're leaking," Denise said after reviewing the messages. "Not directly, carefully, enough to make people wonder." "What do you suggest?" I asked. Denise smiled. "We don't chase whispers. We change the conversation." Within a week, an announcement went live. I had endowed a new fellowship at a major law school focused on financial autonomy and elder protection. The press release quoted me extensively. Confident, clear, precise. Then came the interviews. I did not mention my children. I talked about agency, about dignity, about the danger of assuming age equal decline. The narrative shifted. Andrew called me the night the second article ran. "You're humiliating us," he said. "No," I replied. "You did that yourself." Claire emailed the next morning. "I never wanted this." I stared at the screen. Neither did I. But wanting is irrelevant once you choose action. That afternoon, Margaret brought me the final documents. The trust restructuring was complete. Andrew and Claire were now conditional beneficiaries. Any attempt to challenge my competence again would result in immediate exclusion. Permanent, I signed, not out of anger, out of clarity. That evening, I sat alone in the living room, the house quiet in a way it had not been since my husband died. I missed him then, truly. The man who softened edges, who believed love could fix anything. It could not. I poured myself a glass of wine and watched the sky darken beyond the windows. My phone buzzed. A message from Claire. "I'm scared. I don't know how to fix this." I typed slowly. "You should have thought about that before you tried to erase me." I set the phone down. Outside, the maple tree dropped another red leaf. Change was happening, and for the first time, I was not afraid of it. The wedding invitation arrived in a thick ivory envelope with gold embossing and just enough weight to feel intentional. "Andrew and Melissa Hartwell request the honor of your presence." Melissa Hartwell. I had met her exactly twice. Once at a Christmas dinner where she spoke to me as if I were a guest in my own home. Once at a charity gala where she avoided me entirely. The date was 6 weeks away. The location was a private estate in Newport. The timing was not accidental. Margaret read the invitation and handed it back without comment. "They're escalating," she said finally. "Yes," I replied, publicly. Denise was more blunt. "They want optics," she said. "The devoted son. The graceful reconciliation. If you don't attend, you're cold. If you attend, they control the narrative." "I'll attend," I said. Both women looked at me. "But not as a guest," I added. Andrew called 2 days later. "We'd really like you there, Mom," he said, voice carefully warm. "It would mean a lot." "I'll be there," I replied. "I wouldn't miss it." He exhaled, relieved. "Good. Melissa's been nervous." "As she should be," I said, and ended the call. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, Denise uncovered more. Andrew had leveraged my name quietly. Conversations with banks, potential investors, casual mentions of eventual inheritance and family realignment. He was spending money he did not have. Claire, meanwhile, had taken a different approach. She showed up at my house unannounced one afternoon, eyes red, hands shaking. "I'm pregnant," she said. The silence that followed was heavy. "Congratulations," I said carefully. "He left," she whispered, "when the money didn't come through. He said he couldn't deal with the stress." I watched her carefully. The way she waited, the expectation. "You should sit down," I said. She took that as permission. "I need help," she said. "Just temporarily. I know I made mistakes, but I'm still your daughter." I felt the old instinct rise, the reflex to protect. Then I remembered the petition, the emails, the timing. "I will help you find resources," I said. "I will not write checks." Her face crumpled. "You're punishing me," she said. No, I replied. I'm stopping the cycle. She left without another word. The wedding day arrived, clear and bright. The estate was immaculate. White tents, strings of lights, ocean air carrying laughter and champagne. I arrived alone. Andrew spotted me immediately. His smile froze for half a second before he recovered. Mom, he said, kissing my cheek. You made it. I said I would, I replied. Melissa approached, tall, polished, eyes assessing. Eleanor, she said. So nice to finally have you here. I smiled. Enjoy your day. The ceremony was flawless. During the reception, Andrew took the microphone. I just want to thank my mother, he said, voice thick with emotion, for teaching me resilience and forgiveness. The room murmured approvingly. I stood. The silence was immediate. I'm touched, I said calmly. But I should clarify something. Andrew's eyes widened. I am not here as a symbol of forgiveness, I continued. I am here as a witness. Gasps rippled. I wish you happiness, I said to Andrew and Melissa. But let there be no confusion. My assets, my decisions, and my future are not part of this celebration. I raised my glass. To truth, I said. Then I walked out. Behind me, the music resumed, too loudly. The illusion crept. The fallout from the wedding was swift. Andrew's calls went unanswered. Claire's messages became erratic. Friends asked careful questions. The kind people ask when they sense something has gone wrong, but are not sure how close they are allowed to step. Denise advised, silence. Let them unravel, she said. And they did. Within a month, Andrew's financial house began to collapse. A loan he had secured on anticipated assets was called. A partnership dissolved quietly. Invitations dried up. The whispers he had planted turned back toward him. Margaret forwarded me a filing. Andrew had attempted to contest the trust. Again, this time, the conditions triggered. Automatic exclusion. Permanent. Claire found out through her attorney. She came to my house at dusk, pounding on the door. You did this, she screamed when I opened it. You ruined him. No, I said evenly. He did, she sobbed. Collapsed onto the porch steps. I was scared, she said. I thought if we didn't act first, you'd cut us out. I knelt in front of her. You made fear your advisor, I said. And fear is expensive. She looked up. Is there anything left for me? I paused. There is help, I said. There is guidance. There is love. There is not money. She nodded slowly. I understand, she said, though I was not sure she did. Weeks later, Andrew sent a final email. You won. I hope it was worth it. I read it once, then deleted it. What he never understood was, this was never about winning. It was about survival. I sold the Brookline house that winter. Too many ghosts. I moved into a smaller place overlooking the harbor. Light-filled. Quiet. Mine. On my desk sits a framed photograph of my husband. He is smiling. Kind. Unaware of what would come. Sometimes I wonder what he would think. Then I remember something he once said to me. Late at night, after a difficult board fight. You don't bend when you're right. You endure. I endured. And in doing so, I reclaimed something my children tried to take. My voice, my name, my life. And the story is not over yet. I thought distance would quiet things. That was my mistake. 3 months after I moved into the harbor apartment, a letter arrived from an unfamiliar law firm in New York. White envelope, crisp, overconfident. Subject line, notice of intent to depose. Andrew was not suing me directly. That would have been too obvious, too easily dismissed. Instead, he was challenging my competency retroactively through a civil claim tied to my former company. He alleged that decisions I made during my final year as chief financial officer were compromised, that the board had failed in its fiduciary duty by allowing me to operate while emotionally impaired. If he succeeded, the implications were staggering. It would not just tarnish my reputation. It would unravel transactions, invite regulatory scrutiny, and open the door to damages claims. He was willing to burn down an entire building just to prove he still mattered. Margaret read the filing twice. This is reckless, she said. Yes, I agreed, which means someone is pushing him. Denise confirmed it a day later. Melissa, she said. The wife, Melissa Hartwell Whitmore, had not married Andrew for love. She had married him for proximity, to money, to status, to the promise of a life she felt entitled to. And now that promise was slipping. She's been shopping the story, Denise continued. Selective leaks, framing Andrew as the concerned son of a powerful but declining executive. It plays well with the right kind of reporter. I closed my eyes. This was no longer just family drama. This was war. The deposition notice gave me 30 days. 30 days to prepare. Margaret assembled a team. Securities counsel, former regulators, a litigation strategist who specialized in hostile narratives. Men and women who had dismantled billion-dollar cases with patience and precision. They combed through my final year at the company. Every memo, every approval, every signature. There were no errors. What there was, however, was something else. A pattern. In my final months, several decisions I had opposed were overridden by the board. Acquisitions rushed through. Risk thresholds stretched. A consulting firm hired despite my objections. That firm's name caught Denise's attention. Hartwell Advisory Group, Melissa's father. The realization landed slowly, heavily. Andrew was not the architect. He was the access point. They had not just come from my money. They had come from my credibility. If they could discredit me, they could rewrite history, shift blame, protect themselves. I sat alone that night, the harbor lights flickering like distant stars, and felt something I had not allowed myself to feel in months. Rage, not hot, not explosive, cold, focused. I authorized Denise to dig deeper. What she found changed everything. The consulting contract had been a conduit. Fees inflated, deliverables vague, funds redirected through shell entities. The board had relied on my reputation to shield the decision. If I fell, they would walk away clean. Andrew had unknowingly placed himself at the center of something far larger than inheritance. I smiled. Because for the first time, I was not reacting. I was ahead. The deposition took place in a glass tower overlooking Midtown. I arrived early. Navy suit, low heels, hair pulled back. The version of myself that boardrooms respected and underestimated at their peril. Andrew sat across from me at the table. He looked thinner, older. His confidence had frayed around the edges. Melissa sat behind him, hand resting possessively on his shoulder. She did not smile. The attorneys began gently. Background, career, timeline. Then the questions sharpened. They asked about stress, about grief, about whether my husband's illness had distracted me, about whether I had relied too heavily on others during that period. I answered calmly, truthfully, with receipts. Margaret sat at my side, silent. When they introduced the Hartwell Advisory contract, I leaned forward slightly. I objected to that engagement, I said, formally, in writing. There was a pause. Andrew looked at me sharply. I warned the board about insufficient due diligence, I continued. My concerns were overridden. The opposing counsel hesitated. Are you suggesting impropriety? I am stating facts, I said. Interpret them as you wish. Melissa shifted in her seat. They pressed harder, suggested I was deflecting, that I was protecting myself. I smiled. No, I said. I am protecting the record. Then Margaret spoke. We will be submitting supplemental exhibits, she said, including correspondence, risk assessments, and internal objections previously withheld. The room changed. By the time the deposition ended, Andrew would not meet my eyes. Outside the building, Melissa confronted me. You think you're clever, she said. This won't end well for you. I looked at her. It already has, I replied. 2 weeks later, the story broke. Not the one Melissa wanted. An investigative piece detailed governance failures at my former company. The consulting contract, the ignored warnings, the internal dissent. My name appeared exactly once. As the voice who objected, regulators announced a preliminary inquiry. The board issued statements. Andrew's lawsuit evaporated silently. But consequences have momentum. Andrew lost his advisory role. His speaking engagements vanished. Melissa's father resigned for personal reasons. Claire called me late one night. I didn't know, she said quietly, about any of this. I know, I replied. There was a long silence. I'm tired, she said. So am I answered. After we hung up, I stood on my balcony and watched the water move steadily below. Unbothered, unaware. I had spent my life building structures, companies, families, systems. Some held, some collapsed. What remained was this. I was still standing, and the final reckoning was coming. Because secrets, once exposed, do not retreat. They demand a conclusion, and I intended to give them one. The call came from Claire on a Sunday morning, the kind of morning that feels deceptively calm, as if the world itself is holding its breath. "I need to see you," she said. Her voice was steady, but I recognized the strain beneath it. Not to ask for anything, just to talk. We met at a small cafe near the harbor. Neutral ground, public, safe. She arrived early, no makeup, hair pulled back without care. She looked smaller somehow, like the version of her that existed before ambition hardened her edges. "I'm leaving him," she said without preamble. I stirred my tea slowly. "Who?" "Andrew," she replied. "I've been helping him. Too much. Cleaning things up, lying, convincing myself it was temporary." I said nothing. "He told me you were cold," she continued. "That you'd always been that way. That everything was a transaction to you." She finally looked at me then. Really looked. "And I realized that wasn't true," she said. "You were consistent. He was manipulative." The word hung between us. "I didn't know how bad it was," she said. "The debts, the pressure from Melissa, the way they kept pushing him to fight you, even when it was clearly destroying him." "You still signed the petition," I said gently. She nodded. "I know." We sat in silence for a long moment. The coffee machine hissed, cups clinked. Life went on around us, indifferent. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she said finally. "I don't think I deserve it yet. But I needed you to know I'm done choosing fear." I studied her face, the familiar lines, the traces of the child she once was. "Leaving is the first honest thing you've done in a long time," I said. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She wiped them away quickly, embarrassed. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I know," I said. "But fear is survivable. Betrayal is not." She nodded. "I don't expect anything," she said. "I just wanted you to hear it from me." When she left, I stayed behind, watching the harbor. Boats moved in slow, deliberate arcs. None of them rushed. None of them looked back. That afternoon, Margaret called. "It's over," she said. "With Andrew?" I asked. "With everything," she replied. "The board inquiry concluded. No further action. Your record is clean. Publicly. Permanently." I closed my eyes. After everything, after the noise and the legal maneuvers and the whispered threats, it ended not with drama, but with finality. Andrew sent no more messages. I heard through Denise that Melissa had filed for divorce, that her father was cooperating with regulators, that Andrew was considering relocating, somewhere quieter, cheaper, smaller. For the first time in over a year, my life felt still. That evening, I opened a bottle of wine and sat on my balcony as the sun dipped below the horizon. I did not feel victorious. I felt complete. People assume revenge is loud, that it ends with shouting or courtroom theatrics or public humiliation. They are wrong. True revenge is quiet. It is living well, without needing to explain yourself to those who tried to erase you. 6 months have passed. I wake early now. Not because I must, but because I want to. I walk along the harbor in the mornings, listening to the rhythm of my own footsteps. I read novels again. Not contracts, not filings. Stories with messy emotions and imperfect endings. I volunteer twice a week at a legal clinic for older women navigating financial control and toxic family dynamics. I see myself in their eyes. The disbelief, the shame. The slow realization that love does not require surrender. Claire and I speak occasionally, carefully, boundaries in place. She is in therapy, working, learning what it means to stand without leaning on inherited power. There is no money exchanged between us, only honesty. Andrew remains distant, silent, a ghost at the edge of my life. And that is as it should be. I have rewritten my will, not out of anger, out of intention. Most of my estate will fund scholarships, legal advocacy, and housing programs for women who were taught too late that their worth did not diminish with age. A small portion remains in trust for Claire. Conditional, transparent, earned. Some might call that cruel. I call it just. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the woman I was at the beginning of this story, standing in my foyer, black stockings itching, an envelope in my hands, still believing that motherhood was a permanent shield against betrayal. I want to tell her something. I want to tell her that losing illusions is painful, but losing yourself is worse. That boundaries are not punishments, they are protection. I want to tell her that the world will try to convince her that after 55, her value lies only in what she leaves behind. But that is a lie. Her value lies in what she refuses to surrender. I did not win because I destroyed my children. I won because I refused to let them destroy me. If you are listening to this and something in your chest feels tight, if you have felt that quiet shift when love turns conditional and concern becomes control, know this: you are not imagining it, and you are not alone. There is power in clarity. There is justice in patience, and there is a future waiting for you that does not require your silence. If this story resonated with you, I invite you to like, comment, and subscribe. Share your thoughts. Share your experiences. These stories matter, and so do you.